You're morally responsible for your thoughts, words, and actions.
Right.
Period.
Right.
Right? And
And
I don't.
and,
Yeah.
and I don't want to minimize, this is a whole nother area. I know we can go on a lot of tangents on this. I don't want to minimize what women have been through, especially in their childhood.
Let's talk about this then, please.
So what I have found, and I just started seeing this pattern. I go, there's got to be something going on here. As I'm counseling, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of these husbands and wives,
Unbelievable.
I'm seeing a pattern in the reviling wives. And of the hundreds of ones that I've counseled, about 80% of those reviling wives had some kind of traumatic experience in their childhood. Now, when I say traumatic, I mean that they've been raped,
Okay.
they've been sexually molested, they got an abortion. There's all kinds of things. Now, I realize she chose to get the abortion, but sometimes it's a young girl, and I go, that's horrible that she
Yeah.
has to go through that. Abortion is wicked sin anyway, but a little girl having to go through it is just horrible. So
Okay.
what happens is that trauma is exactly what you described. Sometimes it doesn't kick in for 5, 10, 20 years later, and she just gets full of rage over her husband who didn't do anything like that to
Hmm.
her.
Hmm.
Didn't have nothing even remotely like that. But she just gets gripped by this, and she's blinded with that rage. Now, again,
Hmm.
I have sympathy and compassion for what she went through as a little girl. I go, it's just wicked and horrible that men would do that to little girls. But your point, she has to be held accountable, compassionately held accountable as an adult grown woman who's 40, 50, 60 years old. You can't treat your husband this way.
Yeah.
It's wicked. It's godless. You're blaming your husband for something that happened to you as a little girl. Well, I'm not blaming him. He's just like my uncle or my father or my brother. I'm like, no, he's not. But you're
Hmm.
so blinded, you're just got this tunnel vision that bitterness has set in to that woman's heart. Started as a little girl, but again, it seems like it doesn't manifest until many times decades later, and then she's full on just hostile and uncontrollable and unaccountable. So again, we have to have compassion for what these women went through as little girls,
Mm.
but we still have to hold them accountable for what they're doing now and saying, you don't get a pass on this. You
Yeah.
really don't. Any more than a man does. And I'll say this too. I see the same thing with men. Men that were molested and abused as little boys, when they become adults, the same thing happens to them. They
Hmm.
become uncontrollable, full of rage, and you go, what's going on? Where did this come from? So this is a big, deep topic, but we have to biblically and compassionately hold people accountable for their sin. Nobody gets a pass over what they've been through from their past.
So I have a lot of thoughts about this because before I became a Christian, I spent a long time in the New Age, which you and I've talked about.
Right.
And the New Age world is big on huge. And this might be the number one draw of it is healing, quote, healing trauma, right? And now there's all different categories of trauma in terms of the way the word gets used.
Right. I
So
think it's misused too and over.
yes, completely. Yeah, and if you want to go looking for various offenses that have been committed against you through your whole life, if you frame them that way, you'll find plenty. Like there's a video going around right now of the women's rage rituals where they're banging the
Yeah.
sticks. Apparently, that retreat costs $4,000, which does not surprise me at all.
Wow.
But if you tell men or women that there's something in their past to be angry about and to let it out,
Yeah.
then even if there really isn't a whole ton that we might objectively call, terrible or sinful, they'll still find something to be angry about.
You
Right?
bet.
There's plenty to be angry. Like Welcome to Earth. We have angry sinners' hearts,
You bet.
right? So the heart will manufacture whatever it needs to.
You bet.
So, but here's the thing. So having been in countless retreats and rooms where this is exactly what's going on, and I've been participating in them, so like, part of this, I look at these things and say, it's not as if these forms of quote unquote trauma are new. It's not as if prior to the 1960s or 50s, like no one did anything to harm anyone at all. And it
Right.
was just utopia, right?
Right. Yes.
So I'm trying to figure out why and what has happened now. Because I don't think that it was that way. At least, I mean, I wasn't around in, let's say, the 1800s or the 1700s. Like, I wasn't there, right? So, like the boomers. So
Look at the bear again, Bill.
I had
Good, Will.
to. So I gotta believe that these things were happening, and that doesn't make them right at all. They're still
Right.
morally wrong. They're still sinful, and in many cases, still criminal. But people managed, it seems to me, to live their whole lives without making what happened to them in their childhood their husband or their wife's problem. Like,
Right.
yes, of course, all sinners. There's no papistry going on here. The heart is not basically good. That's not what's happening, right?
Yeah.
So of course there were criminals. Of course there were terrible people who through being broken became broken themselves and went on to pay that forward. Let's say, but it seems to me that terrible things would happen to men and women for centuries, and people understood that it's not like, well, this just means I have license now to go treat the man who loves me best like dirt, or the woman who loves me best like dirt. Like, when did trauma
Yeah.
become a license? I mean, a license to kill. I mean, in many ways, maybe not murder, but like
Well,
in a way that would truly be violation of a commandment.
what it is, Will, is unbridled psychotherapy.
Yeah.
And that's infiltrated the New Age movement, and it's
Yep.
infiltrated the church as well.
Yeah.
And big time, huge. That's one of the reasons I became a nouthetic counselor, 30 years ago, was because of the infiltration of psychotherapy into the church, where it's all about sympathy and feelings, and now it's about compassion on steroids, where you feel so bad for what people have been through that any expression that they give is legitimate. And this is where, yeah, excellent book. Yeah,
Joe
Joe
Rigby,
Rigby.
Emotional. I'm interviewing him for the podcast next week,
Yep.
scheduled to.
No, I
Yeah.
read that. Excellent. Well done. But the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. James
Amen.
chapter 1, right? See, ritual anger, just going full on with anger is going to make things worse. It's going to harden the heart. It's not going to somehow magically cause all this anger and bitterness to escape and leave the body. It's actually encouraging it to stay in there.
Mm.
Ephesians 4 that says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. What does the
Mm.
very next verse say? And give no opportunity to the devil,
Devil. Yeah.
right? Because what happens? You let that anger fester and stay in your heart, even overnight. The next morning, the enemy is able to take advantage of that and saying, you've got every right to be angry. These men mistreated you. These people did horrible things to you. You should be angry. You should be full of rage. You should be, breaking sticks on the ground. You should be, screaming and yelling at your husband. You should be reviling these men. This
Hmm.
is a whole nother area too. I don't know
Hmm.
which tangent you want to go on with this, but
All of them.
I've all of them. But this is another big, big problem: is the so-called conservative women that have a platform and they're counseling other women. And
Yes.
I mean, I'm thinking of a number of them. I'll name their names: Leslie Vernick, Darby Strickland, Sheila Gregoire,
Hmm.
Kaylee Triller. I mean, these women, they actually urge the women into sin, not just divorcing their husbands. But I had an interaction with Kaylee Triller on Twitter, and she said, bad men deserve to be reviled. She actually said that. She used the word
Whoa.
reviled. She used the word
Whoa.
reviled, and I said, you're kidding me. You're actually encouraging women to sin? Oh, you're just twisting scripture. I said, no, I'm not twisting scripture. This is how,
What?
how can you say that this is okay?
Oh my
Do I
goodness.
really need to point out, Jesus was reviled and didn't revile in return? I mean, 1 Corinthians 5 and 6, we do church discipline for reviling. I mean, do I really have to point all that out? And it's just the men are so evil. We have to hurt them
Hmm.
verbally. We have to do this, and we got to basically burn down the marriage. And And so, you've got women like this, and there's a bunch of them. These women have a huge following, and you've got a bunch of them. And then you got pastors and counselors that have been so feminized, and they
Yeah.
don't even realize it. So they're supporting these women. It's a recipe for disaster. It's a train wreck in the making. And so, you've got this momentum that is just building and building. And in the meantime, it's Proverbs 14:1. The wisest of women builds her house, but with her own hands she tears it down.
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Yep.
these women are. They're tearing it down. I don't love you. I don't care for you. I don't want you in my life. I've got one, I counseling one right now, and the wife said, I don't want to be married to this man anymore. I just want a partnership to raise the children.
Wow.
And the man is not, the man is like I described before. He's gentle, he's kind, he's sweet, he's loving, he's probably too passive. He's not too aggressive. He's not an angry man. And you go, where is this coming from? What's happening to the women of our society? And why are the men not doing something about it? That's what's that's what's so concerning to me. I know that you're doing a lot about it. You've been doing a lot about it,
Mm-hmm.
but I know the average man that has any kind of a platform is just staying quiet because once you speak out, you get a lot of hate, don't you? You get a lot of attacking.